Happy video day, guys, and happy Make Up Your Mind. Today we're going to be doing another Make Up Your Mind where I search through my collection and try to mimic a brand new release to the best of my ability so that we can go ahead and kind of dissect the color story, see what it's going to look like, and just kind of go over everything together. I'll give you guys my thoughts on what I think of the color story alone and whether I think that the palette is going to make sense, and I tell you whether I think I'm going to pick it up or not. So there's a lot of stuff to go over in this one. I decided for this one I'm going to be doing the 3 new palettes that were just released by Makeup by Mario. So if you guys do know, he released the Master Mattes this year, the Master Metallics. He's come out with a few different palettes, and he released some more palettes for the holidays. So these are his quads. There's 3 different ones. There's one called Rosey Glam, Bronzey Glam, and the last one is called Party Glam. Each one is actually retailing for $25 US. You are getting 4 different shades in it. He did say on his Insta story that it is a combination of shimmer, satin, and mattes in each one of these quads. So I decided that I wasn't really sure which one of these I would want to pick up. I actually asked you guys if you were interested on my Instagram, and it seemed like this was a 50-50 toss-up. Some people were interested, some people weren't, and I was kind of debating. I wasn't sure if I wanted to pick one of these up or not, so I said, time for Make Up Your Mind. So that is what we are doing today. And of course I did my Insta challenge, and these are some of the people who actually guessed that today's video was going to be on these quads. So thanks so much for entering, and don't forget to follow me over on Instagram to get a chance to be featured in my next Make Up Your Mind. So let's go ahead and let's get into this. I have a few really interesting things to go over with you guys, so let's get into it right now. All right, so before I go ahead and show you guys my results, like always, if you're not subscribed to the channel, I would love it if you would go ahead and hit subscribe right now. I do a Make Up Your Mind every single week. We dissect every new eyeshadow palette that I possibly can to kind of go through our collections together and decide whether it is something that is worth picking up or not. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's get into the results. So these are the results of the 3 different palettes. I did use his Instagram stories that he put up in order to get the swatches, because there is actually no swatches online at the moment that I'm filming this, but I was kind of going back and forth between his Insta story swatches and as well as just looking at the colors in general to kind of just get an idea of what these could look like. And I think for the most part, I'm able to see these palettes. I'm able to see them for the colors that they're going to have in them. I'm a little bit familiar with his formulas as well, but besides that, I'm just more interested in whether I would put these colors on my lids right now than I'm interested in the formula at all yet, because if I don't like the colors, I'm not going to pick it up even if it's the best formula in the universe. So let's get to the point and let's see if these are even colors that I enjoy. And of course, I always encourage you guys to try this at home on your own, and you know, if you like the colors, you might love these colors even if I don't. So let's get into the very first quad. So the first one that I want to go over is the Bronzey Glam. So the Bronzey Glam, to me, guys, is probably the most attractive for me personally. When I saw the release image of this one, this is the one that I automatically threw into my cart at Sephora, and I was like, oh, I'm picking this one up. I had to stop myself. Because I kind of just like second guessed it, and I started saying, but it looks a little similar, like I've seen it before, and that's what made me kind of like go and stop. So I actually pulled 3 palettes to get this one, but I'm going to tell you that's just because I was being a perfectionist and really trying to get the exact colors. But there is a few palettes that I think have a very similar color story to this that you might not need to pull out so many palettes. So the palettes that I used was my Pat McGrath Celestial Divinity. I also jumped into the Natasha Denona Gold palette for one color, and finally the Master Mattes from Mario. Now I will say, for every single one of these, what I was really trying to do is see how many I can mimic using the Celestial Divinity and the Master Mattes, because these are 2 palettes that I just added to my collection. And I will tell you guys, I was looking at some of these colors going, I really feel like, you know, I can use these 2 to kind of mimic a lot of it. So I was really trying my best to stay within those 2 palettes, but of course I always have to add in a little palette here and there. This color right here is a very nice like champagne. I feel personally, me down the line, I have this color in a lot of palettes. So I was jumping into Pat McGrath for this one, and I jumped into this color right up here on the top. This one looks like it's going to be a little bit more high shine than his color. His color looks a little bit more more satiny, and this one might be be a little bit more high shine. However, it's a very, very similar tone. At least I can get an idea of what it's going to look like. I feel like this color down the line in a lot of palettes, I kind of have something really, really similar. It's a very pretty color. I like this color, not complaining about the color. The next one is one that I feel like it's going to look really similar to this color in the Pat McGrath. Now, he described this as a goldy kind of bronze shade with an olive undertone, and that's kind of like what I feel like this is. This one might actually have a little bit more olive, but it depends on how you look at it. If sometimes when you look at this, it looks a lot more gold, sometimes it looks a lot more greenish olive. So I'm going with this color. I was also looking at his like crumbled up swatches, and it really reminds me of this shade. I feel like these two shades, if anything, are going to be pretty similar to what I'm seeing going on in his new palette. Now, the next one was one that I really was looking inside of Celestial Divinity, and I felt like this is where I had to pull in the Natasha Denona Gold palette. And I am going to tell you that this palette also has a very similar vibe to this new release from him. So I do think you can kind of create similar looks using this one alone. But what I did was I grabbed this color right here, which is kind of like a bronzy tone. He did say that this one was going to be more bronze. That's why I grabbed this one. This one has a very nice true bronze to it. I feel like that tone is best reflected inside of the gold palette, so that's why I pulled that one. I think it does a pretty nice job of mimicking. So then the last one, a lot of the mattes, what I was trying to do was trying to stay within the master mattes for a lot of the mattes, because a lot of the mattes remind me of the tones in here. So I do feel like you can kind of mimic the mattes a lot just using this. So the color that I ended up using was inside the master mattes. If you guys see that this one right here, it's kind of like a very deep, very warm brown. He did say that it was going to be a warm brown. I feel like it's going to look super similar to this tone. So right here, I feel like that's going to look pretty similar to what the first quad is going to look like. I'm going to say right now, I love the color selection here. I think it's really, really gorgeous, but obviously you guys saw that I found it pretty easily in my collection. It's a very, very, very pretty quad, but I do feel like I do own it pretty similar in my collection. So let's move on to the next one. At the end, I'm going to give you guys a little bit more information as well as deciding which one I want to pick up, if any. So the next one I want to go into is the Rosey Glam. Now, I think the Rosey Glam out of every single one of these is probably the most unique looking one, at least in my opinion. The most different colors, I feel. But when I was looking at it, it really reminded me of a palette that I just got. It kind of reminds me of like the Mini Zendo vibe. So I feel like if you have Mini Zendo, this is kind of like a very similar vibe to what he did. So the first one, I'm going to go into the silver from Mini Zendo because I do feel like this is a very, very similar silver. I feel like he said that it had a little warmth to it. This one has a little bit more of like a purpley shift to it. That's why I feel like it's going to look kind of similar. It goes really good with the other colors. So I think it's going to look kind of similar to this. So the next one, like I was saying, I'm trying to stay inside of the Celestial Divinity. I jumped into this one right here. This is one that shifts. It depends on how you're looking at it. And he did say that his color was going to shift a little bit. Like it looks a little bit purple, and then depending on how you look at it, this one has like that purpley, kind of a little bit of a pinky look. And in the pan, it looks a little bit more pink. So if you guys can see a little shift that it has, it does kind of remind me a lot of what the palette is looking like and a lot of like the swatches that I saw on his Insta stories. So these first two colors, they're very, very pretty. I feel like I already kind of own them, and I own them in very recent palettes. So that's kind of what I'm really, really looking at here. So the next one, what I did was I jumped right back into Celestial Divinity, and I jumped into this color right here. This one reminds me a lot of what I read the description was going to be. And when I swatched it, it kind of reminds me of the tone, and it's more of a rosy tone, but it does go within those purples. It goes really, really nice with the rest of the color story. This is what it's reminding me of. And when I was looking at this, I was already thinking it's a very cool color story, and I really like this color story, but it's really not something right now that I'm looking at going, well, I use that a lot. I mean, I have to be honest, I usually don't. And then the last one, of course, I went back into Master Mattes to find the last color. And what I ended up doing is he said it was more of a cool tone color. He has a few cool tones in here. So what I did was I jumped into these two and mixed them together. Anytime that I use mattes, I tend to always mix them. Like I'll go into one and then I'll deepen it with another one. It's not always that I just go into one shade. So I feel like that right there is kind of rounding out what that palette is going to look like. I think that this is a very pretty palette, the same way that I think this one is a very pretty palette. Both of them look nice. I mean, I have to say, color arrangement wise, I like both of them. So now we're gonna go into the very last one. So the very last one, where am I gonna swatch you? My palm? So Party Glam is the blue one. That is the look that I kind of recreated on my eyes today. And of course, it's because it's probably the one that I have the least of. But just looking at the color story of this one alone, what it just reminded me so much of is the gold palette. I was looking at these colors and going, ooh, this looks so gold. Like it's its cousin or twin sister or very close sibling. So the first color, what I ended up doing just to stay within the gold palette, was I jumped into this color right here, which is a blue. What I did was I actually dabbed right into this blue right here that has more of the shine, and I mixed them together to create this metallic-y blue. Because in the Natasha Denona formula, this one right here, this blue is almost like a lid topper more than it is a full shade. And I feel like you have to kind of like mix them together. I think I'm just gonna put it right here. So that would create a little bit of more of like a metallic blue. Now, also, I also have the Natasha Denona palette right here from the holiday that has this more vibrant blue. I could also just say, let's just go straight away and just go for a very metallic-y blue and just grab this one. So in between either one of these, I feel like the blue, at least I kind of have an idea of what it's gonna look like. I like the idea of blue and I love the way they look inside of quads and stuff, but when I really start to think of how many times I use blue, it's like, when was the last time you used blue? Well, for the next one, I remembered, and this was a little bit harder because this is also a silver. But when I was listening to his description, it almost sounded like this silver was very cool tone, but it wasn't as cool tone as some of the Natasha Denona silvers that she released. But I remembered inside of this palette right here, this is the Starry Eyes to Hypnotize, there was this bluish silver that released. This reminds me a lot of the color. It almost has a little bit of like a blue shift to it, which reminds me so much of what he swatched, and it also goes really good with the blues. I'm almost pretty sure it's going to be something similar to that. And yes, the silver with these blues, it makes a really cool look, a nice effect if you can go either the silver direction or you can go in the next color direction, which is going to be like the brassy tone that has a little bit like a little bit of a green in it. And what I did for that tone was I jumped into this palette. So this is where I'm starting to see the similarity between this palette and that palette. If you jump into this color right here, there's a really beautiful gold, but it has a little bit of green in it. It's so pretty. I'm gonna just like swatch it here. I'm going on my arm, but it has this really pretty like gold greenness to it, almost like a lime, but it's not. It's so pretty. It's what I have in the center of my lid, and it reminds me so much. Like it reminds me so much of the color that he just finished releasing in this quad. So this is going to be like a very similar color story. And then finally, he said a navy. This Natasha Denona palette has this gorgeous blue right here that's pretty deep, and it's basically a navy. And when you build it up, I mean, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper depending on how much color you put on. This is definitely a very buildable shade. So you can get to a very deep navy with this Natasha Denona palette. So that kind of rounds out that palette. So if you guys can see, I basically was able to recreate pretty similar each one of these quads. There's only 4 shades in here and it is $25. It's a decent price point, but you know, it's only 4 shades, you know? So I'm just looking at this, I'm trying to decide, like just looking at these different tones, what I do like that he did here is you have a bunch of different directions. So like if you're somebody who likes more of like the neutrals with a little bit of like a bronzy green shift, you might love this one. If you like the rosy tones, you might go in this direction. If you like the blues, you're gonna be over here. So he did create a quad for bunch of different people, so I really do love that. But like looking at the colors and being somebody who picks up a lot of the new releases, I feel like if you have a few of these new releases, you might have stuff that's really similar that, I don't know, it might be a little bit repetitive for you. Definitely, I think that if you have the master mattes, you do have a lot of like the brown shades that are inside of these different quads. Obviously, the blue one has a blue matte, which is not part of that, but I feel like the master mattes has a lot of the mattes that are in these quads. And then definitely the Celestial Divinity, you guys guys saw that I was able to pull a lot of the colors out of this. Another thing is, if you're looking at this palette right here, I do want to say there is a few palettes that have similar color stories, like even this one right here that it released from Marc Jacobs has a very similar idea. I also think that the gold palette's going to give you something very similar. You know, so I have a few palettes that are going to give me this look. I like it. I think it's very pretty. If you like this type of color story, then definitely as a quad, it would be very easy to travel with. But I'm going to make up my mind on this one and say I really just don't need it right now. Especially with all the different palettes that I've picked up, it's really not unique enough for me. When it comes to this one, the Rosey Glam, now this one I have to say to me is probably the most unique. I like this one. I feel like not every single one of my palettes has these colors, and it's really, really pretty color story. But that being said, since I just picked up the Celestial Divinity that I feel like gave me very similar tones, and the Mini Zendo, I feel like I already just picked up two palettes that are giving me such a similar vibe to this. So even though I do like this one the most, I feel like the vibe is kind of there and I kind of already have it. So I'm also going to make up my mind on this one and say I'm going to pass. Now, when it comes to my collection, I would say that the blue one would probably be the one that I would say I would have the least of. Even though I do have a bunch of hues of blue, I'm not somebody who likes to wear blue. So typically I would say, well, the blue one is probably the one you should go for. But honestly, after seeing that the color story is so similar to my gold palette, I almost feel like it would be a waste for me to pick up this one because I love my gold palette so much. And if I'm going to use those type of colors, I'm going to use my gold. And I'm going to also say that the colors that are in this quad from the gold palette are probably the colors I use the least. I hardly use the blues in here. Like, it's really the least color I've ever used inside of this palette. So I'm going to make up my mind on this one and say I'm going to pass on this one too. So it looks like all three of these I'm going to pass on. And that is just because I personally have picked up a lot of the brand new releases, and a lot of the brand new releases kind of have these tones in them already. So I'm really just going to say I don't need them. And I'm happy that I did this Make Up Your Mind because I already had one of them. I had this one inside of my cart and I was just going to get it anyways. But, you know, after just kind of seeing these color stories, I feel like I should just wait a little bit longer because I really love the Master Mattes from him. It was such a great buy for me. I really enjoyed this palette so much. So I feel like the next one that I pick up from him, I really want to really enjoy it. I want to just feel like I didn't just pick it up just to get it. And I feel like any of these, that's what I'm going to be doing because I just got palettes that have very similar colors in them. But that being said, if these colors are anywhere up your alley and you like these, I definitely know his matte formula is insanely good. I love the matte formula. The color selections, I think he did a great job with as well. I am going to tell you on the blue one, because I did do the blue lid today, it is a little limiting. You're going to do a very, very blue lid. And because the blending shade is only this really deep, deep, deep blue, you don't really have too much to blend it out. You just have to put the blue down and just use it as a blending shade. The best thing to do with this story right here would be to use the blue as a deepening shade and then just have fun with those metallics as your pop shades. It'll probably be the way that you'll be able to create the most looks with it, but definitely it's a cool one. This one you're going to go very pink, so if you like the really pink looks, you're probably going to love this one. And this will probably be the most neutral one, so if you like more of like the neutral, more earthy looks, you're probably going to love this one. So like always, I'm going to go ahead and link all of these palettes down below if you guys are interested in them. But for this one, I'm actually not going to be picking up any of them. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this Make Up Your Mind. Don't forget to leave me your comments down below and let me know what you guys are thinking. And of course, guys, I will see you next week with another Make Up Your Mind on a brand new release. So thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe if you have not already, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.